to go ahead and get started today. I want to thank everybody for joining us for the Fall HR Training Conference. We're excited. We have 1,600 learners that are going to be joining us over the next 3 days. My name is Shelley Bush-Rao. I work in the Division of Human Resources and Finance Services, and very happy you all are with us today. We are going to be recording each session, and so it should be available after we're done with the conference. And that way, if you happen to miss any of the great information that we're learning about today or in the next 3 days, you'll be able to find that on our website. So without further ado, I am going to turn over the mic to our trainers today. And we have Allen and Amy Bartels, who will be joining us to talk about changes and transitions during stressful situations. And Amy and Amber, I'll let you introduce yourselves to the group. Amber, I can't hear you for some reason. Are you?
Can't hear her. Okay, well, I'll start while Amber's figuring that out. My name is Amy Bartels, and I'm actually Human Development and Family Science Specialist located in Camden County. I cover about 9 counties, just straight down the middle of Missouri. I've been with Extension for about 10 years, and we're really excited. Amber is my cohort, and she is in the Greene County area. I'm going to introduce while she's just figuring out her screen or her sound. And she's been with Extension for a year, so off and running, and so excited to be partnering with her today on this workshop for you all. So, Amber, were you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, fantastic.
Okay. Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, Amy. And like she said, I've been with MU Extension for about a year. Apparently still trying to figure out technical issues with Zoom, but we are happy to have you here today because guess what? We've been through some transitions and changes this year, and we've all been in stressful situations sometimes. Some of us have been in them 10 seconds ago when their sound didn't work for a conference. But this is a very relatable topic today, and we're going to talk to you guys about how to handle these situations in the workplace and how we can all work together during those times. And feel free throughout the time, if you have questions, to put those in the chat. Me and Amy will be looking through that throughout the time. And let's get started.
So we've got some objectives to go over today. We did this presentation as a part of workforce development. So we were speaking to Missourians around the state that maybe were dealing with job loss, job transition, those kinds of things. We don't want to specifically say job loss because we're all system employees, but we know that there are some transitions that have been happening. And so we really want to speak directly to that today. So here are our objectives. We really want you by the end of this session to understand the signs of survivor guilt or survivor syndrome in the workplace, kind of what that feels like. And we're going to walk through that process of grief and maybe the signs that a worker might show. And then we're going to understand a little bit better how stress affects our mental health. So we, like Amber said, we've all been under this umbrella of stress 2020, right? I mean, you just have to say that. And I think we all go, oh yeah. So finally, we want to talk about the long-term impact to workforce retention and really how you support, whether you are supervising others or you're kind of in that I'm being supervised role. That's our point today, and we're going to walk through those.
So Amy said the word survivor syndrome in those objectives, but what really is it? And how can we understand it to help our workforce and business and community become stronger? When large changes occur, we all start to see anxiety and a lack of motivation that accompanies whether it's a layoff, restructuring, any type of change in our workplace. And research has indicated that many employees start polishing off resumes or job searching when these changes or transitions occur. And these actions help those still employed or still in that transition feel more in control of the situation. But some of these key players may decide they don't want to stay, or they can't handle transition, or they start waiting for the next bad news to happen. And this can start creating an environment that can make you start to feel insecure or start feeling some fear. So that's when survivors start having what we call workplace survivor syndrome. And it was a term coined by an organizational psychologist to describe the emotional, psychological, and physical effects of an employee who is in the midst of a company's restructuring or changes or transitions. Reactions to the workforce changes are all individualized. We've all know how we handle those situations, and we all know how maybe a coworker or friend would handle those situations. And so it's how we handle the process. But there are some key behaviors that have been observed in research on how people may experience this. So the grid on your screen, we have change. And there's things that are going to happen when there's transitions, stress in a workforce. You're going to have what we call the survivors, or the workers who are under that stress of the change, start feeling that fear, insecurity, uncertainty. You might feel that frustration or anger or resentment. You might start saying, this isn't fair, or how come I didn't understand this or know this? You might start feeling distrust. But today we're going to talk about how to kind of shift those perspectives as well. As an organization, you might see, or a department, you might see decreased morale, reduction in motivation. Maybe your most motivated person is only doing 2 things off their to-do list versus trying to get the whole to-do list done in a day. That's an extreme example, but we all know and have seen that before. There may be that reduction in engagement. That might be risk avoidance as an outcome of the organization. Maybe too scared to take a risk because it might shift things again. And you might have that loss of productivity. So that kind of explains kind of the basis of survivor syndrome and how that can look during changes, and how you might start seeing some of those, what people consider negative emotions. And we'll shift that. So I don't want you to think we're only talking negative emotions today. So there can be impact on your workforce during changes in stressful situations, such as restructuring, changes in departments. And research has shown that the reduced commitment and diminished productivity can linger for the better part of a year after changes or transitions take place. So on your screen, I'm going to go through some of those things that can have an impact on your workforce. We've talked about that decreased morale. You know, sometimes we all have that decreased morale when things change. We don't know how to handle it. We were used to the way things were. You might have an increase in absenteeism. And this doesn't just mean increase of taking sick days or vacation days. This means they're present, but they're still absent. You're seeing that decrease in productivity and morale. They're there, but they're still absent in what the day-to-day work is. You know, that organizational commitment or employee engagement, we talked about that on the earlier side, might be reduced as well. And there might be reduced speed and decision making. People might fear if they make the wrong decision or make it too quickly, they could cause too many changes to shift, or it could cause some sort of restructuring or some sort of issue and cause additional stress. And then there could be a greater task focus by managers due to the impact of changes and restructuring in a workplace or department. And the last is trauma. A lot of times when we talk about trauma, we refer to, there's big T's and little t traumas. And a lot of times we look at those big T traumas that are, injuries, sexual violence, or life-threatening experiences when we think of trauma. But there's also little t traumas. And these are things like changes in job, a death in the family, bullying, harassment. Little t's are not things that still have an impact on our ability to cope with day-to-day living. However, they're not maybe leading to PTSD or some of those mental health issues. So we need to be aware that people may be experiencing little t's or little traumas due to these transitions and changes in the workplace. And these all affect individuals differently. and start focusing on their trauma rather than the events happening themselves. And so this is a list of all the impacts it can have on our workforce when changes can occur and when we're stressed. So with that, Amy's going to talk about those common types of stress and what you may be feeling during these times.
Right, so you knew it was going to come up, right, that we had to talk about stress. I feel like stress is the four-letter word of the last 6 or 8 months. Here's the thing, stress is, it's actually your body's natural reaction to any kind of demand that disrupts life as usual. And so in small doses, stress is really good. It's like, it's that thing that motivates and pushes you. It helps you conquer a fear. It gives you extra endurance or motivation to get something done. But there's also this bad stress, which is often caused by worries by like things like money, jobs, relationships, health, and we've had all of those, right? Just kind of hanging on us. And it can be sudden or it can be long lasting. Here's the thing, feeling stressed for too long, whether it's for several hours or days or months, it sets off your body's warning system. And you've got these physical and emotional alarms that start going off. Your body's stress warning signs tell you that something isn't right. And so it's much like that check engine light on your car's dashboard. If you neglect the alerts that are sent out by your body, you could have a major engine malfunction. I want to talk to you about the 2 types of stress that you see on the screen, acute and chronic stress. So you might be feeling some of these when it comes to your work life, maybe even your personal life. If you're living in a county that is got a lot of requirements due to COVID, then you might be feeling even an extra layer of stress. So that acute stress, that's the type of stress that throws you off balance just momentarily, that like catches you off guard, right? This is the type of stress that comes on quickly and often unexpectedly, and it doesn't last too long. But it requires a response and it shakes you up. So it just leaves you feeling like, whoa, I'm looking out my window right now, and every now and then this huge gust of wind comes by and all of these leaves go flying. That kind of reminds me of acute stress. I mean, it's just like out of the blue. So it could be something like an argument with someone in your life, or a project or an exam that you don't feel adequately prepared for. It's that acute stress. The other one is chronic stress. And this chronic stress is the type of stress that tends to occur over and over and over, kind of on a regular basis. It's like the one that you wake up and you go, oh yeah, I still have that. This type of stress can leave you feeling really drained, and it can lead to burnout if it's not effectively managed. And that's because when the stress is chronically triggered and the body's not brought back to that sort of relaxed state before the next wave of stress hits, the body can stay triggered indefinitely. And so that burnout is a result of prolonged chronic stress, of situations that leave people feeling like this big lack of control in their lives. Certain conditions of a job can create greater risk of burnout. That includes things like a high level of demand, unclear expectations, maybe a lack of recognition for achievements, and a high level of risk of negative consequences when those mistakes are made. So some of you right now may be shaking your head and going, yeah, I might have both of those. So we're going to look now at kind of what happens in the body, some of those warning signs of stress. See, our body gives us these messages. Those warning signs can either be physical, behavioral, emotional, or relational. So spoken like a good human development person, I'm going to cover all those different parts of the body, right? So when that stress gives us that little ding, like that check engine light, sometimes physically we feel tension in our body. So I want you to see if you resonate with any of these as I go through them. Maybe headaches, muscle aches. How about digestive difficulty, upset stomach or ulcers? Sometimes an existing health condition might become pronounced during this time. You might feel extreme fatigue, shortness of breath, sometimes sweating or shaking. Those can all be physical symptoms of stress. Emotionally, you got some things going on as well. So you might notice that you've got an increase in irritability, restlessness. Maybe you're just feeling really discouraged or hopeless right now. Sometimes you might feel like you want to isolate yourself or have really difficulty concentrating. You might even see some increase in feelings of panic or anxiety. Behaviorally, these might be things you notice and they might be things someone else notices. So maybe difficulty with sleep, maybe an inability to relax or de-stress. Maybe it's additional anger, right? So you find yourself hopping off at someone. Sometimes it's that sort of that foggy feeling, that trouble with decision making. Or you might be increasing your use of self-medicating. So things like increased alcohol or other drugs. Maybe it's you're self-medicating with food, or maybe you're not wanting to eat at all. And then finally, the warning sign of stress. And again, these aren't just one in a row. They really are non-linear. Is those changes in relationships. So communication difficulties, whether it's with a loved one or with a coworker or with a boss. Avoiding others or withdrawing. Maybe it's overworking. So maybe your tendency is, if I just get a few more emails sent. And maybe it's avoiding that interaction at all. I'm going to just shut my door and no one bother me. I'm putting my do not disturb on, right? I don't want to talk to anybody. So all of these warning signs for stress kind of leave us with some coping strategies that we do. And sometimes they're healthy and sometimes they're not healthy. So along with these signs of stress, you might notice this in yourself and you might notice it in someone else. So some of these unhealthy coping things, I talked about this just a little bit in the slide before, but isolating, overeating, maybe it's Amazon 24/7, you know, you're buying some things that you don't need. That aggression, substance use, procrastination, right? I'll get to this another time. I can't deal with it right now. And then those, you know, that change in your sleeping habits. On the flip side, and we're going to kind of hopefully end this on a more positive note, we do have some healthy coping mechanisms, and sometimes we're able to do those, and sometimes it really takes that intention. So that asking for help, right? So if you find that you're isolating yourself, what are you doing to ask for help? Or how can you say, boy, I really need some help with this. Doing something physical. So exercising in some way, shape, or form, whether it's just getting up for 5 minutes and walking around your office, or going outside and taking some deep breaths, taking a walk. Talking with a friend. I'm going to get back to that professional help in just a minute. So getting in touch with somebody, even if it's over a screen, and just having a laugh. Doing some of those self-help things like deep breathing or other relaxation techniques, yoga. And then figuring out what are your problem-solving techniques. The last one up here, and I don't want to belabor this, but professional help is available. And the sooner you seek professional help, if you feel like that's the road you're going down, the better chance for kind of a swift change or recovery, or just getting you on that path to feeling a whole lot better. So Amber's going to walk us through kind of what these stages look like.
Yes, so a lot of the time when we're going through transitions and stress, grief is a natural response. We're losing something, whether it's a position, a coworker, even if it's a positive change, we're still losing what used to be. And so grief is a natural response to loss and what we're going through. So Kubler-Ross stages are related to change. a lot of research has gone in on how her stages can also be applied to change. So individuals go through these stages at their own pace, and staying at each stage varies from person to person. So just because the person next to you is maybe in a different stage doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're going through the process differently. So that first stage is denial. And this is when you may not believe that the rumors or the changes are true, or maybe they've made a mistake, or maybe this is 6 months down the line or 10 years down the line. And so you kind of go through that denial process. And once you've moved from the denial process, then you move to anger. You recognize that denial cannot continue, and you may start getting irritated by the very facts you're hearing and become frustrated. People around you might find you getting angry without any apparent reason. You might start asking yourself, or the people close to you, why me? It's not fair. Or how can this happen to me? Who do I need to blame? Why would this happen? And all those what if questions start coming out in anger during that anger stage. And then we go to the third stage. And this is when it involves the hope that you can avoid a cause of grief. This is usually the negotiation for an extension of something or something made in exchange. Like, if I do this, can this person still work with me on this project? Or I'll work harder, or I'll take up some of the slack. Or you start doing work that you may have avoided in the past just to make things better. Or I can work through this. And so you really start getting in that bargaining stage. And then after you've bargained and tried to negotiate things, you move into that depression stage. And soon depression starts going to this feeling of sadness. And usually your thoughts at this time are, there's no point in working harder. There's nothing to look forward to. There's too much change. It'll be really tough to find anything in this new way. Or I feel like giving up, and you're in that depression phase. But then you go to stage 5, and you tell yourself it's going to be okay, and there's no point in fighting anymore. And I'm prepared for something new, and the possibilities are better here. So you get to that acceptance and that almost hopeful stage of, there are better things, we will get through this, and we can prepare for something better. So no matter your relationship with what you're grieving, whether it's a person, a change in positions, you are grieving. And you'll feel a general sense of sadness, and you'll feel guilty that maybe you survived the change or that you're going through this differently. And you'll still value what you're missing, the who or the where. Maybe you changed offices and you're grieving, well, I had the same picture in the same place for 20 years and now I'm having to rearrange what that looks like. And that's okay. Maybe you're not by the same person in the same office anymore. Or maybe someone that held a key position has shifted. Even though you might have a jumble of emotions, those emotions are real and your grieving is normal. And that is because there is something in grief called ambiguous loss. An ambiguous loss is a loss that occurs without closure or clear understanding. And this kind of loss leaves a person searching for answers and delays the process of grieving, and often results in unresolved grief. Ambiguous loss differs from ordinary loss in that there's no closure, so allow yourself time to grieve. The emotional trauma of saying goodbye or goodbye or even a shifting change is very similar to losing a loved one in the grief process. So loss is the absence of a possession or future possessions and the absence of a relationship. So it's just a loss of any kind is that ambiguous loss. And remember, everyone grieves differently and may be in a different stage. You may have already be in the acceptance stage and wondering why someone is still getting angry or bargaining. Remember, everyone grieves differently on how they grieve. And it's a continuous process with many changes. And so, you know, you might be fine one day and saying, you know, it's okay that I've changed offices, you know, but maybe someone's birthday comes up or someone always brought cookies around the holidays and you realize you're not going to have that this year. And so you might start feeling sad again, and that's okay. And then grief depends on what else is going on in a person's life. We've all had different stressors this year. We've all had similar stressors as well. And so everyone might be looking at this view differently based on how long you've been with an organization, you know, your relationships, other things going on in your life. Maybe you're having kids at home where you're having to do virtual schooling as well. And having all those additional stressors may change how you grieve in these grieve in this situation. So here's some tips to process that grief. Give yourself time to adjust. Change is hard. No, it's inevitable, but it's still hard. So give yourself time to adjust. Because you never know, you know, you just need time. And then recognize that your emotions are legitimate. You know, maybe you're telling yourself, you know, I need to finish these things on my to-do list. I can't be sad today, or I can't be upset. But it's okay to recognize, you know, I'm frustrated today because I used to do it this way, and I need to look at some new ways of doing these things. And then write about your feelings. And this doesn't mean necessarily that you have to write a journal, but if that is your way, that's great. But if you're like, well, I don't want to write a lengthy story or about my feelings, just write down what you're feeling. Or there's a grid out there that shows, you know, you think of happy, sad, mad, glad, but here's all these other emotions. Are you feeling disappointed, frustrated? And just write down what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. It can release what you're feeling. And maybe it was just some of that acute stress. Maybe it's just because you got an email that frustrated you. And once you wrote it down, your feelings are better now. And then accept the reality. I said, change is inevitable. And I feel like we might be playing that on repeat this year. But we need to accept the reality. Sometimes that's harder, but we need to accept that what is new and what changes are occurring. And some other things to consider when you're processing this grief is to think if you have to acknowledge how you have to acknowledge this pain or this grief. Are you having to do it with coworkers or publicly with others? Are you being able to identify and name the grief in the first step of healing? So do you even know that you're grieving the situation that you're in? And then accept the ambiguity. And then give yourself permission to grieve. And maybe you were feeling these things before this presentation, but you didn't know that it was grief. Because a lot of times we don't when we're going through these processes of change and transitions and stressful times. And so Amy is now going to talk about how this can affect our mental health.
Right. So, gosh, in all of this, it's really important to be aware of what's going on, not only with yourself, but with others. There's a documented link between high job stress and increased risk of mental health issues. So things like depression and anxiety. I want to bring to your attention, remember that the slides that we created, especially this one, was for people across Missouri. But specifically with system, we have some things in place that are great resources and that are available to all of us. So the employee assistance program. So if you just go on MU's website and type in employee assistance program, you're going to get a whole wealth of information through my HR that can help you if you feel like, gosh, I need to reach out. I need to talk to someone. If you're there on campus, the Counseling Center is a great resource to check out. There are a couple different trainings that are offered that deal with mental health that help you to not only kind of work through your own mental health kind of, wherever you are on that spectrum, but how to talk to others. And one of those programs is called Respond. And Respond was developed through some individuals at the counseling center. And it's an MU program, talks about mental health and having that conversation with people in your life or your loved ones. And another one is a program that Extension offers called Taking Care of You. And I'll talk about that one here in just a minute. But it's really important not only to know what resources that you have immediately and available, through our organization, through the university, but also what are some things that you can have on hand. So National Suicide Hotline, the Violence Prevention Hotline, some of those kinds of things, because we know that high stress situations, not only what's going on in our world and in our communities, but also kind of with our university and with our own, situations, whether that's, we have a spouse that has a small business and that's been impacted. So there are a lot of different layers to this whole thing. And being aware of what kind of resources and really having those handy. So taking that information and putting it in your phone so that if it's in the evening or it's on a weekend and you're like, gosh, I just need some support, that you've got it there in hand. I do want to talk, so Amber, if you want to flip that slide, I do want to talk a little bit though about how you take care of yourself. And a lot of this isn't necessarily reaching out to a professional, although that's a really important part. But a lot of this is noticing when it's time for some self-care. And self-care isn't selfish, right? Self-care actually makes us better able to do the things that we want to do in our lives and to take care of those around us that we care about. So some of those things include maintaining that good, healthy work balance. So when is it time to shut off the email notifications? Or when is it time to close the laptop? We're in virtual world right now, and I don't know if you can tell, but I'm working from home. We have county offices, but our office right now is in some transition. And so it has nothing to do with COVID, but I'm actually working from home. And so that has some challenges in itself. I have to know when it's time to just say enough. Make sure that your sleep is good. So if you've kind of changed your sleep patterns because you're spending a lot more time on a screen, make sure that you're kind of allowing yourself to be in that routine and have some downtime. You might want to take up a new relaxation technique. These things are called practice for a reason. They're practice because we're not really born knowing how to do this, but we have to learn it and we have to practice it day after day. So things like breathing techniques, noticing that breath in and that breath out, meditation, yoga, some of those kinds of things can really be calming and can help us. So whether you're taking advantage of that through an app, whether you're kind of logging on and watching some of our fellow colleagues that are presenting some of those classes online, you can seek help, like I said, through the employee assistance program by taking a class and really just making it intentional that you're trying to do some things to take care of yourself. Along with that is taking care of other people. So if you want to flip the slide, yeah, we've got all these other people in our lives, right? We really don't live in a bubble. Even when we are isolated or maybe even quarantined, we still have other people that we rely on and that rely on us. So by remembering that work and life are interconnected and working on that communication and that transparency, if you're struggling with a loved one at home that maybe is, maybe you've got children that childcare is an issue right now, or school is, overwhelming, visit with your supervisor, talk with your educational director, whoever that person might be transparent. Because you know what, they might be struggling with some things as well. showing empathy. So empathy is one of those things that it's not feeling sorry for somebody. It's not sympathy. It's not like, oh, dang, that stinks. It's the, wow, okay, you have a lot on your plate as well. So when we have a director or an administrator that has some new directive that they have to implement, realize that they're just a person too that's trying to do their job to the best of their abilities. And we're all one giant team here. So we're all trying to do things to make our lives and the lives of Missourians as good as we can. Empathy really in the workplace, it does begin at the top, but on the flip side, it begins with you. So wherever your position is, whatever level, you know, in the chain, in all these links, it really begins with you. I had a silly moment this morning. I got up and the sun was shining before the clouds moved in here in mid-Missouri. And a silly song came on the radio. It's a Beautiful Morning by the Rascals. So if you don't know that one, it's an oldie, go look it up. But it was just like, oh my goodness, how could you not want to just, you know, dance around to that song? Because it was a beautiful morning. And my 17-year-old, she's a senior, and she was like, oh, not a morning person. But all of a sudden, it was like having that silly song playing helped her to go, okay, I can do this. I can, you know, get myself out the door and go to high school, right? So it's just about kind of realizing and helping and seeing the other people around us. One of the other things on the list is trying to do this as a team. So when can you connect what you're doing to bigger purpose, right? And when can you help be a part of that decision making? When can you offer your insight? And when can you listen for others to offer their insight? And the last one, and this is your little bit of homework that we're going to leave you with, is who needs to hear from you? Who do you need to check in on? Who needs to hear from you? How are you doing? Are you doing okay? How are things going? I was thinking about you, right? Because just that checking in, just that piece of asking someone how they're doing goes a long way toward helping not only that person, but helping you through this whole process of change that Amber and I have been talking about today. All right, so that's your homework. We kind of had some heavy topics, flipped it around to kind of look at how we can work together to make this a team, and I'll let Amber wrap us up.
Yes. So thank you, everyone. Today we, you know, like Amy said, we started with that survivor syndrome, that survivor guilt. Where am I at? How do I go through the grieving process? What is stress? And then we looked at how can we do self-care and help ourselves with stress, and how can we help others? And I see in the chat we've had some recommendations for some apps for self-care. They said the Calm app. I know there's others out there as well. Also, we didn't talk about gratitude and joy list as being positive things to help decrease our stress, but those are things you can do as well. If before you leave, I'm seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat. We really appreciate you being here, but we'll open it up for questions, as well as if you want to put your own self-care tips in here. We can all learn from each other. We talked about all of us being a team, so feel free to put those in the chat as well.
Amber and Amy, there is a request for the slides. Is it possible for you to share that with me, and I can make sure the group gets it, or how can we get those slides?
Do you want to answer that, Amber?
Sure. We'll get back to you on that. I'll have to talk with the workforce group as well, since it started there. But we hopefully will be able to share those. But we will get those to you, Shelley. Hopefully.
Very good. I understand. And we are recording this, so folks can go back and look at parts they may wish to see again as well.
Thank you.
Amy, your sound's going a little. Amy said thank you. Your sound's going soft again.
Does anyone have any questions we could ask of Amber and Amy before we end our session today? Feel free to unmute if you'd like to do that.
I'm sorry, I missed the first minute. I didn't realize I was going to have to log in. What was the resource you used for these? You had mentioned that you had gotten the slides from somewhere else.
Oh, we worked in collaboration with the workforce development extension specialist as well. This actually started in a collaboration with me and Amy working with our workforce counterparts to do a webinar for these state through their workforce webinar series based on what we were hearing about transitions and changes going in our counties.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
MU Extension Workforce Development has a Facebook page, and they have all of these presentations housed there as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, we can get that information to you, or you can search them on Facebook. It's MU Extension Workforce Development.
And Debbie, I think if you look at that Facebook page, that will, because we did 4 of these different parts of this series, and so there's a little bit of that about remote working sprinkled throughout all of those.
You would anticipate in the future maybe a more of a peer-to-peer program set up by the university? I know at the police department we have a peer-to-peer program that is showing a lot of success, but I also know some of our officers and staff members would feel more comfortable talking to someone outside our police department. And I know there's been a ton of success with peer-to-peer programs within first responders. And I didn't know if the university was going to be able to, incorporate more. And I know the hospital does an amazing job with their peer-to-peer program.
So I can't speak for the university system at large, but within Extension, we do have some mentoring programs, and I know that there is great success, just like you said, with talking, especially when you kind of spread out that hierarchy a little bit, and you're able to talk peer to peer. So yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a wonderful addition, especially in light of what we've been going through. And I think that we will see a lot of changes coming. I think we all can sort of see the writing on the wall that this virtual world and this virtual kind of delivery is not really going to go away. We might start to see more people in person, but figuring out opportunities to connect with each other and to maintain that rapport and that kind of that upward vision that we have. Really, we've got to have people to talk to. So.
Yeah, and I guess I apologize. I didn't answer that question really well. I guess our problem is getting more training for more people to go through it. And this is an excellent start. I mean, I'm going to share this with all of our people at the department, but I think if some peer-to-peer training could be offered, that'd be and a good resource also. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if you want to put your contact information in the chat, we'll make sure that we send you some information because Amber and I are connected with MU Extension. We service Missourians all around the state. So a presentation like this, or even the 4 that we did for workforce, we would be happy to come and do those specifically for your group. And we can kind of craft them for what you're needing. So if that's something you're interested in, put your information in the chat and we'll make sure to get in touch with you.
Amber and Amy, there is one question in the chat about learning more how to lower stress for those working remotely and how to support remote coworkers. Do you have any resources or information you could share with us about that?
Amber, do you want to talk, or I can?
You can start and I'll put in my information as well.
Yeah, so we do have a certification program that's offered through MU Extension. It's the Remote Worker Certificate Program, and in that program, it talks a lot about how do you navigate this, and how do you do this? How do you just make that whole world happen and do it successfully? So I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking. I know that the remote feels really disconnected, and boy, speaking from an extension person, we're, like I said, we're spread across the state, and we feel really kind of sometimes disconnected anyway. And this is really added to that, because now not only are we sort of located away from, the Columbia hub, but we're really not seeing each other, not gathering in person at all. So I don't have off the top of my head great resources for that, but it sure is needed. So I do appreciate you bringing that kind of to the forefront, because I think the more we reinforce how much this is needed, the more hopefully something will happen. No, that wasn't a great answer.
No, I was hoping you would talk about the program, because I knew you knew more about that than I did. So, but yeah, it is something that, it was a change that happened to a lot of people in Missouri in this last year, and we're all learning how to handle that stress and how to work remotely, and it's definitely interesting. And I agree, Robin put in the chat, really interesting to relate this to survivor guilt. It is difficult to validate your feelings of grief and stress when you feel that you shouldn't be feeling anything but gratitude and still have a job and be healthy. Exactly. Gratitude's great, and we can do that to help decrease our stress, but we also need to name those feelings and when we are stressed. And so it's a balancing act. It's a hard balancing act, but we'll all work through it together.
And I did see several of you that put information to contact you in the chat, and Amber and I will be following up with that. So expect to hear or see something from us in the next day or so.
And Amy, if you'll keep talking, I'll find the Taking Care of You site and put it in the chat.
Right. So also Thursday morning at 8:30, I'm giving a presentation on our extension program called Taking Care of You. We did offer that a month or so ago to the UM system, and that might be an option again. It's an 8-hour program that we break up. Thursday morning is not an 8-hour, it's 45 minutes. But it's an 8-hour program that we break up either an hour a week. A lot of times we'll do that over the lunch hour. Or we do 2-hour kind of segments at a time. But if that's something that you think would be good for, team building, we just did a group at UMSL, and several of those folks said they really were interested in bringing that Taking Care of You to their to their subgroups. So it can be a really good, like I said, team building, motivational. We do a lot of different information in there based on positive psychology and mindfulness, but it works on really that idea of taking care of yourself and what that self-care looks like. Talk about gratitude and empathy and joy and some of those bigger concepts surrounding our values and really what that looks like. So if you want to join me Thursday morning, I think there's still some spots.
Any other questions? And I'm sure a few of you are signed up for our afternoon session. That's also kind of built on this about emotional intelligence and empathy in the workplace. Well, thank you all for coming. If you haven't put your email in the chat and would like to, feel free to, and I'll hand it off to Shelley.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate the great information. And thank you all for attending today.